everybody, to the 2022 installment of the Simpson Lecture. So this is an annual event sponsored by the Simpson Center. We had a hiatus for 2 years because of the pandemic, but we're very happy to be returning in person this year. We unfortunately did have some sad developments since our last meeting in 2019. Lou Simpson, who gave the very generous gift to fund the center and finance this event, passed away last year. So we're very sad about that. But we remain incredibly grateful for his support. He was somebody who believed very much in advancing knowledge and to continue to learn. And today's speaker, I think, embodies those values very well. So we're incredibly happy this year to have Tom Sargent delivering the Simpson Lecture. I think he needs no introduction in this room. He, of course, won the Nobel Prize in 2011 with our colleague Chris Sims. So that obviously was indicative of the impact that he's had on the profession. And it's really impossible to overstate his impact through his work on a wide variety of issues: inflation, unemployment, robust control, optimal policy, his kind of commitment to developing methods to produce better models. So his work has inspired many of us, but his reach goes beyond that. He's produced countless students for people who travel to departments. You will, in many cases, come across Tom Sargent students, and I have to say, myself, I'm always so impressed when I meet Tom Sargent students. You just see something about the way they think about things, creative approaches to thinking deeply and rigorously about important things. So he's inspired a large number of students that are now very active in influencing the profession. He's also been a prolific textbook writer. Back when I was a graduate student, there was the Black Book. Then a few years later, there was the Red Book. He wrote a whole bunch of other books as well, but in terms of the textbooks, then there's the Lundqvist Sargent, but it's actually had its own color sequence. I think it was blue, then it was red, then it was black. Tom tells me there's going to be a 5th edition. I don't know what color that one's going to go back to blue, or you're running out of colors for that. But anyways, through his writing, his textbook, his advising of students, he's just had a tremendous impact. I had the good fortune to be a graduate student in Minnesota back in the late 1970s, where there was a special configuration of people at that time: Sargent, Sims, Prescott, and Wallace. So it was an amazing environment to be there among this small group of people who had such a profound impact on the profession. And anyways, enough of me talking. I know you all came to hear Tom, so without any further ado, please welcome Tom Sargent.
Okay. Thank you. So this is going to be, okay, here goes. This is going to be an extended back of the envelope calculation. And me trying to understand some things. And then the other thing is, in terms of history, I don't know if you've heard of tax farming. It was an idea that the French government used before the French Revolution. They just privatized taxes. They gave the authority to collect taxes to some entrepreneurs who had an enforcement technology of some kind, and they did it. And then their instruction from the government was just maximize present value. Okay. That's not what this talk's going to be about. It actually, did it work out well or not? I might have something about that. It ended with this practice ended with the French Revolution. Okay. So, and the reason I mention that is because of something from at Princeton, is Yuli Sanikoff, who used to be here, and the way he set up some problems. Okay, so here's going to be the focus. This is going to be, okay, Richard, okay, I'm going to do this like this is graduate PhD macro, and the way I do that, I teach stuff I don't understand, and kind of confess that, and you're going to see that. So this is going to be a kind of history of thought, and then reinterpreting it up to date. The focus on this is going to be two 1970s Barro papers that I'll come back to. Basically one. Barro's 1979 paper, and he had a striking result. He had a zero drift condition for risk-free government debt and complete tax smoothing. That's a result that you'll often see cited. And that was his 79 paper. And one of my principal focuses in this project is to understand components that can reproduce added components. Barro's model was his description. It leaves a lot of things out you might want to know, like randomness. There's a random walk that emerges, but there's no randomness explicitly in the model. There's other things that are left out. So we're going to add a bunch of stuff and ask, does it disturb this zero drift tax smoothing thing? That's one thing I'm interested in. And then we're going to add, and this is another Princeton thing, we're going to add a component that disrupts it. And I'm getting this from Aguiar and Amador. Here's some other focuses in this paper. Debt limits. What determines debt limits? So there's going to be a theory of debt limits. There's going to be two theories of debt limits. One from Keynes in 1926, and another, okay, once they have debt limits, time to reach debt limits and how you reach them. Another focus is why in this structure is optimal government debt, net debt, risk-free. It's going to turn out it's risk-free, just like it was presumed to be in Barro. And then another thing is it's going to be our version or my version of an issue that's raised in Olivier Blanchard's presidential address. Why does a risk premium appear in the dynamics of risk-free government debt? So in this model, the dynamics of risk-free government debt are going to be affected by a risk premium. Why? So Hanno Lustig and some of his co-authors have that. And then, and this is it's going to hit us in the face, how to respond when interest rates, when low interest rate make quote unquote debt cheap. What should you do? That's an issue that Olivier's talk was. Okay, so that's going to be focus. So what are possible substantive issues? What is this good for? I don't know what this thing's good for. So I'm going to make up some substantive issues that I think it might be good for. And again, what's the cost of a balanced budget amendment? In the 60s and 70s, conservatives like Milton Friedman were advocating a balanced budget amendment. So we're going to have something to say about that, and kind of in the spirit of, it's not going to be as well done in the spirit of the lunchtime seminar I had the privilege to go to. I'm going to give you a way to measure that. And then, okay. Oh, and then Blanchard's going to appear. Okay, so now, here you go. I'm going to show you two Barro models. Things stripped off, kind of done the way I want to do them. So Barro wrote two really influential papers among the influential papers he wrote in the 70s were his 74 paper on Ricardian equivalence, and then his 79 paper about not Ricardian equivalence. So here's the structure of his 79 paper. And Ricardian equivalence, what did that mean? There's indeterminacy of government debt and indeterminacy of a tax sequence. You had a zillion government debt processes and a zillion tax collection processes that gave exactly the same outcomes. That's indeterminacy. People call that Ricardian equivalence. So what was the model? So the model was, so there's an objective function, and what the objective function was, well, This is from Barro. There's no uncertainty. To maximize, there's infinite horizon. Maximize the present value. What discount rate? A fixed discount rate. A risk-free, there's no risk. Constant R. And maximize the present value of GDP minus tax collections. That's what you're going to do. And what's the budget constraint? Well, you start with some initial debt, B0. You have to honor that. You're committed to honor whatever debt there is. And the constraint is the present, so you got to service that debt. How do you service it? The present value of taxes minus the present value of government expenditures has to equal that debt. So tau minus gamma, that's tax collections minus government expenditures. And if you take that optimum problem, well, if you take here's how you can solve it in one line. This is high school. You just substitute. You take the bottom equation, and you substitute in the top equation, and you get taxes disappear completely, and B0 shows up, and instead of y minus tau, it's y minus g, because it's present values. So how should taxes be set? They don't even appear in the objective function. So you set them anyway as long as it maximizes, as long as it's satisfied. That's Barro. That's the structure of the equivalence result. Okay, so that attracted a lot of attention. So then in '79, I think Barro didn't like that. He wanted a theory of government debt. He didn't get one in '74. He got one in '79. Now, how did he get it? This might not be the way a lot of people want to get it, but I'm going to stick with Barro. So the way he did it is he changed the objective function. You didn't get the answer that a theory of debt. So he's going to keep the constraint. So he's going to change the objective function. And what is he going to put in there? He's going to put in a convex extra cost of raising taxes. It's his incompletely articulated description of deadweight losses from raising taxes. That's it. So you put that in, and you get a striking result. You get the result that now you just want to roll over the debt. Debt's determinate, and so are taxes. And you completely smooth taxes across time. So debt's constant, taxes are constant. So now he gets a determinate theory. Okay, so what we're going to do is this slide's going to have everything. This next slide. So, and then I'm just going to repeat myself over and over again and drill down. Okay, so the top thing, that's Barro 79. And the bottom thing is this paper. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the objective function, and we're going to change the constraints. And we're going to add stuff that Barro left out. And see if, kind of sequentially adding this stuff, how much it disrupts Barro's conclusions. That's where we're going. And almost everything we're going to add is in here. So I'm going to show you. So you're supposed to look at that thing on top, and you're supposed to look at that thing on the bottom. And okay, so what's the same? There's an integral. What's different? There's an E. There's a mathematical expectation. That wasn't up there because you didn't need it. So there's an E. With respect to what distribution? You have to tell. So I have to. That's not on the slide. I have to tell you the distribution with respect to which it is. There's a. There's an e to the minus RT there. And here, there's an e to the minus this thing. But even if that thing is a Amador-Aguiar term, I'll tell you what that is. What that thing is, so e to the minus RT is a discount factor. Lambda t is a stochastic discount factor. process. That's a stochastic process, okay? And then that's a stochastic process. Where does it appear? It appears here. So instead of e to the minus RT, it's this, and there's an e outside. So what this is okay, so this is this, okay. So this is the same, taxes minus government expenditures. What this is, okay, now there's an e, so, oh, by the way, these are going to be risky now, and these are going to be risky. Okay, and now there's an additional term, could call it a Blanchard term. Okay, so what this is that's a jump, that's a jump process. It's a stochastic, it's a jump process. And it's government giveaways, instantaneous giveaways or lump sum taxes, that thing. Okay, and the thing is, and instead of infinity, there's a TD. And that's the terminal date during which you have access to these things. So if you're, okay, so what this is relates to the lunchtime conversation. This is saying that the government can, the government trades risky securities and there's complete markets. Okay. So I told you, but I'm not done yet. Okay. So where does e to the minus RT come from in the Barro spirit? In his model, it's a small open economy. Barro has nothing to say about where R comes from. And in the Barro spirit, we're going to have nothing to say about this. There's a small open economy, and this is determined outside. I had some slides, impolite slides, saying, well, you've thrown the baby out with the bathwater, because don't you know Lucas and Stokey is all about manipulating lambda. Yeah, I know it. But that's not what we're going to do. We're going to follow Barro. This is going to be exogenous. It's going to play a role. I want to stick as close to possible as Barro. Okay, E, so this is just the present value of the government surplus. I got to deduct that thing from the, okay? And it's priced at those Air de Bout prices embedded in that. Okay, now what about this? What about this thing? Okay, so this is an indicator function. And that means you've done something which cuts off your access to this lambda. You've done something, and you've chosen to do something. You have chosen to do something that you're cut off from that. So, you know, if this was 1978, Milton Friedman and his pals would say, you ought to cut yourself off from that because this, that's going to be basically, actually what I should do here is I should have y minus gamma. You could put y minus, what you have to do is you have to run a balanced budget. I'll just say, oh, no, sorry. No, stop, Sargent. Just read. You don't have to run a balanced budget. You do whatever you want, okay? But you can't, after you've done this, you don't have access to this. Well, that's great because this constraint is only about what before you do this. So you don't have access to this, but you don't have this. You've defaulted. So this is out the window. This constraint's out after this. And now what you're going to do is you're just going to, you want to control this. After that default date will come out. So there's going to be a, this is, after this you go to autarky. You go to autarky after that. So you decide if you want to be out of autarky or not. You know, given what you confront, given the prices you confront. Okay, so you're going to choose this. Okay, so what have we added? What have we added to Barro? What have we kept of Barro? We've kept a small open economy spirit. We've added uncertainty. I haven't told you exactly, so I'm going to have to tell you where the uncertainty is, but it's going to be about this y process. I've kept his cost function. I'm going to take his cost function. So I've kept that part. I've added the possibility of default, possibly in the interest of getting debt limits in the Keogh-Levine spirit. I should actually say Thomas and Warrell. It goes back earlier. Okay, I've kept that. And I've added default. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to study this model. That's where we're going. And I want to see what difference it makes and what changes. So again, this is a class. This is a PhD or a class. Okay, so I'm just going to tell you the way I'm doing it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is work backwards. I'm going to kind of work backwards, kind of tell you what happens in there, and then I'll tell you the rest. And I'll kind of spill out the additional details in the model, and I'll repeat myself. So in this autarky regime, I'm going to show you kind of what's going on. There's going to be a I just copied down what in the autarky regime. Once you're there, that's what the value. That's what that integral should actually go from. There should be an s there, and that should be a ds, and those are s's. Those are futures. Okay, but that's the value function when you're in autarky. Just that. It's the present. It's autarky. You have to set tau equal to gamma. So you run a balanced budget, but you got to pay those costs. So you still have those, but just in the Amador-Aguiar experience, we're going to make those costs are going to be at least as bad as the costs as they are when before you've defaulted. So that's that convex cost function, and that's at least as big. And then the other thing, this is a Princeton tradition, a whole bunch of people. Your GDP process is going to be hit by an alpha. You're going to be lower. There's going to be a cost of permanent reduction, and there's just going to be an alpha. It's going to scale down your GDP. Your GDP process looks like this. Okay. And I'll tell you more about this. There's a drift. That's the G is the drift, and then there's these volatilities hitting these Brownian motion components. I'll come back to that. So that's easy to compute. Okay. So here's the working backwards. You haven't defaulted, so you have access. So here's what's going to go on. So there's the objective function. It's the same one I told you. There's that E. That's with respect to, there's that stochastic discount factor. There's this extra term. Oh, I forgot to tell you that term. If that thing psi is positive, there's some extra impatience. There's extra impatience on whoever the government is the agent for. That's going to play a role, just like it does. It plays a role. Amador and Aguiar's book, it's going to play a similar role. Okay, and you'll see where. So that's extra impatience relative to what? The outsiders. Okay. So in Barro's setting, it would be in addition to the risk-free, that interest rate, there's an additional discount that's going on. So you're tilting outcomes toward the present, good things toward the present. Okay, good. And then what's this? This is a stochastic discount factor process. Discount factor process. It's a stochastic process. And the key thing to note of it, that's the risk-free rate, like right out of Duffy's book. That's the price of this. This is the price of risk that's systematic. So in order to, the important part of this, this risk, this risk is here, and it's affecting the GDP growth, and you can insure it. There's complete markets. You can insure it, but it costs something. There's this price eta. That's the market price of risk for insuring that. Okay. But there's no price of insurance for this stuff. The price of insuring this H for idiosyncratic risk. And the vision here is, here's the vision. It's a small open economy. There's outside investors who are pricing your debt. And they're pricing your risk claims. So this is, Schiller advocated governments trading risk claims like this. Risky claims on components of GDP shocks. So we're going to trade them. These outside investors have a bunch of countries they can invest in, and this idiosyncratic risk averages out across these countries, and it's not priced. But this risk has to be priced. Okay, so that's why that's there. So that's it. That's the problem, and the problem is you get to decide how long you choose. You're going to choose. What's the government going to choose? It's going to choose the Barro. It's going to choose when to set this, if ever, when to default, and then before it's defaulted, it's going to choose a tax process. It's going to choose call this a Blanchard giveaway or takeaway process. Olivier told me he likes it that I called it that. Okay, he likes it that he gets the whole region. Okay, you're going to see he gets a whole region. You'll see that's the part he likes. Okay, so that's it. So now I'm going to just kind of repeat. So now I'm going to. Just to clarify, it can be positive or negative. No, you see, no, it's not. No, you don't. No. It's a giveaway. When you got those student loans, when you're about to get those student loans given, there's no cost to that. The cost is these guys are going to have to pay for it. The C affects the tax. Yeah, so I got to show you this. I have to show you. It imposes costs, but indirectly through the taxes. Okay, so now, that's kind of my fault. So now I'm going to show you components of the models. And my co-authors, okay, they're in this fancy slides and they're into colors. Okay, and there's been some, what you're seeing is a Nash equilibrium. I've got to show you the model components. And the way they want when you do this, components are going to be, I've kind of told you, there's going to be arrow securities. So there's going to be A, B, C, D. That's A is there's going to be arrow securities, and there's going to be risk premia. I already showed you those. That's at lambda, and those prices of risk. Second thing is there's going to be Barro tax distortions. I'll show you that. That's that cost function. That's what Richard asked about. A third thing is in the Amador, all sorts of people, there's going to be credit limits. There's going to be a theory of credit limits once I activate those. And then finally, there's going to be Amador-Aguilar extra discounting for impatience. And the way this is going to go is we're going to unleash these sequentially. I'm going to show you some graphs where I unleash these sequentially. I'm going to see what difference it makes. That's where I'm going. Okay, so this is something that, okay, I think this goes back to Eaton Gershwitz, and it goes back to all sorts of people do that, and we're copying it. My answer to Chris would be, no, it isn't the logic. We're just going to assume it. Because we're going to assume it. Because what it is, it's not completely articulated. There's no, it's hardwired in, and it does play a role. And you can see a role. In the Abreu-Pierce-Sticchetti role, you can see where it's going. The worse that is, the better it is. Oh, there are no private agents here. Oh, no, okay, good. Okay, no, I have to tell you. So I'll show you that. So lambda t, that's the rest of the world. It wouldn't make any difference. Okay, I agree with you. Okay. So here's the way. I wrote this differently. I didn't like this indicator thing. I had two integrals, and I had it your way. Okay, in that regime, there's nothing for them to choose. It turns. We'll see. I take this as a constructive suggestion, and it's going to be improved. Yeah. The government is completely cut off from this lambda afterwards. Yeah. Okay, good. Okay. So here I'm going to show you the GDP. Okay, so now I'm going to show you the GDP dynamics and the stochastic discount factor. I already showed you that. And I'm just emphasizing. So there's the geometric. There's the diffusion. There's two Brownians, and there's prices. The prices are down here. Those are the risk prices. The government can ensure the idiosyncratic risk at zero price. Does it want to? Yeah, it wants to. Why does it want to? Because of this, I'll show you why when we get to that. Okay, here's the government. This is important. Here's the government. There's Barro's, there's Barro's tax distortion. B is for Barro. That's important because if I turn on Barro, it means I've added this cost function to his 74 paper. That's what it is. And that cost function, we're going to do it in a special way. That cost function is, it's going to be homogeneous in Y. It's going to factor like that. So it's going to be little tau is big tau over Y. So that's the tax rate. Barro did that. That's the tax rate. And C is this convex function. Okay. So the title of this paper is about P theory, and that's supposed to remind you of Q theory, where there's another convex function. It's going to play the analogous role. There's the budget constraint I told you. There's the transfer. And how is the transfer going to be financed? It's going to be, I'm just going to issue debt. I'm going to increase debt. So there's some initial debt. If I give this transfer, I jump up the debt. I don't finance it with taxes. That's the answer. And there's no extra cost of instantaneous cost of financing it. There's the debt dynamics. Oh, here. This is my single contribution to this paper, and positive contribution. There's going to be an upper bound. We're going to put this in. There's going to be an upper bound on the tax GDP ratio, little tau. There's going to be an upper bound, and it's exogenous. It's imposed outside the model, but not outside authority. It's imposed, I got it from Keynes. And this is when he was thinking about debt limits. Keynes was thinking about debt limits seriously. Because this was after World War I, when France had a lot of debt, and so what he says is, And the question was how to finance it, or could you finance it? Or were you above the debt limit? You want to know whether you were above the debt limit. And this is his famous letter. Look at the title, An Open Letter to the French Minister of Finance, whoever he is or may be. I think there were about 12 in the last 10 months, okay, because they couldn't solve this. So he says you can either, you can increase the burdens on the taxpayer, raise tau, or you can do something partially default. You can reschedule. And then he says, if you choose the first, taxation will absorb nearly a quarter of the national income of France. It's not feasible. That's what he says. Okay, so we're going to set tau not to a quarter. We're going to set it to a half, because that's going to play a role in this. Because okay, C, and that's going to lead to that led Keynes to a credit limit, and it's going to lead us to a credit limit. Okay, but it's not the one that we're going to get from Amador and Aguiar. Okay, so we're going to get a credit limit there, but this paper is about a different credit limit. Okay, so here's the credit limit. So there's going to be the limit of credit is they're all this debt. You don't have to repay it unless you want to. So this is all the theory about, just like Aguiar and Amador's book. It's about when do you want to pay. So it's got to be self-enforcing. So these are debt defaults, consequences of default. One is, there's three. The one Gene spotted, your GDP takes a permanent hit. The other is you get bigger tax distortions. We just made that up. I don't think we're the first ones. And then the other is you get zero primary deficit. Milton Friedman's advice, you balance the budget every period. And that's a bad idea. Actually, piece of history. Do you know when many state government state constitutions require that balanced budget requirement? And it's a bad idea. And when did it get put in there? It got put in the 1840s after a bunch of defaults, and after the federal government. And there's a story about that. So, but it's a bad idea. And then we're going to also impose the same upper bound that Keynes did. And then what that leads us to is, I already showed you the calculation. You got to compute the value function in that autarky regime. That's easy. And now here's D. C is for the credit limit or the cost function, and D is for no, C is just for the credit limit. B is for the cost function. That's for Barro. And then D is for extra discounting. So I'll in terms of motivating it, it's the way this goes is in the Barro, the way I think Aguiar and Amador would answer this is the government, who's acting as kind of the agent for the citizens, it's running this tax smoothing thing, but they look at the stochastic discount factor and they look at the risk-free rate, and they say those outsiders are less impatient than we are. We're more impatient. So we disagree. It's actually this is a model where there's two stochastic discount factor processes, and the internal guys are more impatient. That's it. And that's gonna create a force. You'll see what the force does. The internal guys are more impatient. So I,
Look impatient.
I think I know where you're coming from. No, I don't want to. I'm going to think about it, and I'm going to think about it in conjunction with Gene's thing. It's hardwired here, and I have no explanation. But when Chris asks for a foundation, I'm going to give the same answer. There's no foundations. It's just these internal guys. So I'll do this with psi equal to, that thing equal to 0, so they're equally patient, and you'll see what happens. So if you want to know why that's in there, it's because we want it in there because I want to break Barro. You're going to see. I want to break a result of Barro. And lots of things. It's not until we get to D that we're going to break Barro. And what's Barro? Complete tax smoothing and complete zero drift on government debt. I mean, occasionally. Oh, could it flip signs? It would make.
Become negative.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. The answer is yes, and it will break Barro in a different way. No. That also interacts. And it actually interacts with something that Hume said a long time ago. But anyway, so these are okay. Okay, good. I'm gonna have to remember that. Yeah, I'm going to come back to that. I'm going to say, who's solving that? The person that's solving this is the Treasury. It's the one who's doing a tax. It's the Treasury and the Congress. You know, it's setting a tax and it's setting it's emitting all sorts of debt. It's emitting these state contingent claims. It's trading those, like these Schiller bonds, and it's emitting risk-free debt. Okay. So now we're going to get to finding the state as an art. What's the state? So we've rigged this so that okay. So that's just repeated. So there's the problem of the government, of the Treasury. I'll call it the Treasury. So what's it choosing? It's choosing admissible paths of debt jumps, tax rates, those rates, hedging demands. So it's trading those hedging things, for which it's paying a price for one of them. This value function maximizes this thing subject to the budget constraint and the fact this is a constraint on the continuation value. This continuation value has to be better, at least as good as in autarky. And then the Keynes tax rate. Okay, so now I'm just going to that's it. That's the model, and as you fairly pointed out, there's lots of stuff that's hardwired with. You know, the same answer to good questions is like, it's been reverse engineered to stick as close as possible to Barro and kind of see what features will break it. Okay, so here's what I show you. This is going to lead to Hamilton-Jacobi-Bellman equations. And what's the state? Well, it's either B, capital B and Y, but we've rigged things so that everything scales. So it's just the debt GDP ratio, and that's rigged. So there's a Bellman equation there, and there's one down here. And the spirit of this is that's a partial differential equation, and that's an ordinary differential. Great. That's what leads this to be a back of the envelope. You can solve this almost by hand. You just solve an ODE. That's nastier. It's equivalent. And then so here's the HJ. Here's state variable is the debt GDP ratio. And what is it? It's the risk-free debt GDP ratio. Debt, which is risk-free. Lots of, and this equation is, this is kind of a mechanical answer to Alan's question, which is, well, kind of everything's here. Here's that Barro function, and if I turn this off, this disappears, and it affects this problem. Here's well, here it is, and kind of notice where things appear. Lambda is a risk premium. There's a formula for lambda someplace. Formula for, oh, there's lambda. Lambda depends on a volatility of risk. And it shows up. This is related to the nano stuff. It shows up in this Hamilton-Jacobi-Bellman equation. This is Olivier's R minus G shows up. Now there's a risk premium that also shows up, and this tells it where this shows up. And then there's this term, which is positive. This is the impatience or the more patience. This would go through, and then that's the derivative. So it's okay. So now that's in the interior, and now there's going to be boundary conditions. So the boundary condition is, I'm going to show you a graph, and there's going to be an interior region where you're not in autarky. There's going to be an interior region where you're not in autarky. There's going to be one exterior region where you're in autarky. That's going to be in the right. And then there's going to be another Blanchard region where you're not in autarky, but you want to do something. And that's going to be the debt is cheap region. And you want to do something, and you want to do it fast. Okay, so that's where we're going to go. So there's boundary conditions there. And this is, I think this is a Princeton, there's lots of Princeton products. This is Dixit. Okay, this one boundary condition is going to be smooth pasting. It's on the left. P prime of B is going to have to be -1 at B lower bar. And what's B lower bar? That's the minimum debt you really want. And if your debt GDP ratio is below B bar, you don't like that, and you're going to do something. And you're going to, I'll tell you what you're going to do. Okay, you're going to immediately issue a bunch of debt. You're going to jump the debt, and you're going to give it away to people. And then on the right boundary, that's super contact. That's you're going to see where that you have to go smoothly to the default, the autarky regime. That's where we're going to go. Okay. And then you can calculate this. You can calculate. Anyway, you can calculate this. These are calculations, and they're going to show up in some graphs I'm going to show you. So that's all back of the envelope. Okay, so here's the three regions. There's going to be this. There's going to be this left region. There's going to be the right region, which is what's on this graph is debt to GDP ratio. For very high debt to GDP ratio, you're going to default and run a balanced budget. You're going to go to autarky. In the interior region, you're going to tax smooth. That's the Barro region. In the left region, you're going to you have too little debt, and you're immediately going to jump the debt to that lower bound, B bar, which you can compute. And then connected with Alan's comment, I'm going to show you what the determinant of that is. And your comment about is zeta positive or negative, it's going to matter. And if this is hardwired, Okay, so then here's the scaled. Just rewriting this Hamilton-Jacobi-Bellman equation, this has this, it's going to relate to Olivier's, well, less to Olivier's, the guys who picked up after Hanno. This is the proper discount rate that's appeared here, and it's going to appear in the debt dynamics. It's that impatience term plus that risk premium. And if you kind of ask, why should this appear in the dynamics of risk-free debt when that risk-free debt is not paying a risk premium? How'd that get in there? And then here's net household income. And then here's this drift. That's that drift term. This term is going to turn out to be the drift that I'm going to be interested in. Okay. And then, here's the P theory of the analog of the Q theory, the P theory of optimal government debt. This is the marginal condition that determines optimal taxes as a function of B. So you equate that. Okay. So just going to go. So here's the etymology of P theory. So this is why this is. So there's not quite an isomorphism, but it's very close. It's extremely close. What's the Q theory of investment? The mapping is the capital stock. This is Hayashi or Lucas and Prescott, Abel and Eberle. What's the analog here? Government debt. Q theory, capital adjustment costs. Why did you put capital adjustment costs? Okay. The reason. Okay, there's a history of that. The reason is that without capital adjustment costs, there was no Keynesian investment function. Havelmo wrote a book about that. You don't get and Tobin wrote a paper about it in '55, a great paper. Keynes had a downward sloping investment function, but nobody could get it from an optimum problem until guys start putting capital adjustment costs. You need it to make it a dynamic problem. Okay. The Q theory, marginal Q equals marginal cost of investment. Marginal P equals marginal cost of taxing. That's what, and the cost is read from that value function, just like Abel and Eberle measure their costs from the value function. Marginal Q is greater than or equal to 1. Marginal P is greater than or equal to 1. So all those things, and I'm not going to spend my time on this. Okay, so now I'm going to give a quantitative illustration. Okay, and the way I'm going to say, I'm just going to pick some numbers and show you some graphs because I want to get to the French Revolution. I'm not going to defend these hard. My co-authors would. So there's a bunch of numbers. There's a risk-free rate. See, I want this to be a small open economy, so I would want this for Argentina, something like that. Not the U.S. My friends are from China. They think the U.S. is a small open economy. So there's this quadratic loss function. This is going to play a role. Okay, and then these are these back of the envelope calculations. Okay, now I'm going to show you some. Okay, this is the whole paper. This is almost the whole paper except for Alan's question. And I'll talk you through it. So what's here is A, B, C, and D. Okay, so so all of these things are going to have complete markets, and in place of this Barro's risk-free rate and kind of risk-free processes, there's going to be risk, and it's going to be priced. Okay, so the first, what these are, I'm going to show you the total value function. The total value function is B plus P of B, because the B is kind of with the bondholder, with the bondholders, and the S is kind of like equity, what this government's doing for you. Okay, so that's S of B. That's S prime of B, it's minus S prime of B. That's going to appear in the marginal condition for taxes. That's the tax rate. And here's B. And the reason this goes all the way to 15, it goes way out here and all the actions here, that's Keynes's number. That's taking 0.5 and taking our R plus lambda minus G and discounting it. Using the Barro, the Gordon growth formula. That's where that thing is. And that's really big. And actually, with that thing, you would say Argentina's no problem at all. Because their debt to GDP ratio is 1.5. I know it's even lower. They could go to 15. And the US, so so that's what that says. That's what that Keynes number says. That's going to be affected by the interest rate, but even so, this is a big number. Okay, so now, let's go. What's the dotted line? The dotted line is A. That's Ricardian. So we have not turned on the convex cost. So now, so 40. 40. Anyway, that's the debt. It's indeterminate, and so the theory won't pin down debt and it won't pin down taxes. So that's indeterminacy. It's a bust. Okay, so that's where Barro 74 was. Now we go to the stochastic version of Barro 79. That's stochastic Barro. So now we put in the cost. And so now look what happens. That's that light blue line. That light blue line. Do you see that? And it goes, now there's some curvature here. And now there's a straight line here. There's a reason. And now the tax rate is a function of the B. So now you put the B and you're here. So you can still go all the way out here. And we stopped it. You can go all the way to 15. So there's the same. Barro has a same debt limit that I attributed to Keynes. It's all working on that. Okay. So now. So that's that light blue line. Now we turn on limited commitment, or you don't have permanent access to these markets, no matter what you do, and you've got to do better than you can do in auto. So that's what this LC is, with the psi equal to 0. And now here's what happens here is, don't look at this line yet. You get this red line. And now the red line is exactly the same as this blue line, except now you get a theory of the debt limit. And instead of being 1.5, it's way down here. It's more like the debt limit that people started to talk about for the US, for example. The debt limit went from here, 15, to way down here, and it's not the Keynes restriction that's doing it. Autarky continuation value. And now, what I want to say, every one of those that I've had so far, the red line and the stochastic Barro, the drift of the drift of risk-free debt is 0. Barro has survived randomness and this limited commitment. So it's self-enforcing, but you still get this 0 drift. So what's the idea there? Complete tax smoothing. Risk-free government debt's constant. It doesn't move through time. The tax doesn't move through time. Complete victory for Barro. Okay. So now you'll see why we did this. Okay. It's the same reason Amador came up with this in his thesis, I think. Now I'm going to turn on extra impatience from the domestic treasury relative to the market. And now what happens is this. The drift, instead of being 0, it's really high at first. That's the blue line. That's limited commitment with turning on a little impatience. Okay? And now what happens is it's very high, and then what happens is it slowly decreases. And then what happens is so now, guess what? Debt's moving over time, because that drift's not constant. So debt's moving, and over time, you're actually going to approach the debt limit. Okay, so this is going to be a theory of the debt limit that you're going to go to at some rate. So now you can answer, if you ask how long would it take you to reach the debt limit under stochastic Barro or limited commitment, you'll never reach it, because you're just rolling over your debt. But now when there's increased impatience, you don't want to roll over your debt. Okay? So now, I'll show you. So now all I did, this is the same picture, except I cut this Keynes region off so you could see more what's going on. Okay, so now you're issuing debt at quite a high rate, and then you're going down. I'll show you some more pictures. And then I want to do the following, and this is directed at kind of Alan's observation or question. So notice we started this thing out because we wanted to. The initial government debt GDP ratio was 0. That's where we started out. You can see that's what we chose. Actually, I don't have to say that, because these pictures apply no matter what the government debt. That's what this was. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this from 0 to 0.1, or I'm going to change this to 4. I'm going to increase impatience. So there wasn't much impatience there, just a little. Now I'm going to increase impatience. Now notice what happens. I've activated the Blanchard region. Now notice the blue thing is, now what happens is there's an immediate jump of debt from 0 to this. And the reason is debt is cheap. And you should issue it. How fast? Infinitely fast. And you should do a handout. That's what surfaces here. This comes from the slopes of these matter, and now what happens is you immediately jump here, and then the drift goes like this, and you gradually approach. In this parameterization, the debt limit is the GDP debt ratio. The debt GDP ratio is 2. So that's kind of it. Now I want to conclude by talking about another isomorphism, if I could. Anyway, so these graphs just do the same thing. So this is what extra impatience does. It's just another take on this. So you issue this debt because it's a good idea, and you make the agent makes the principal makes the Treasury makes people better off because they're so impatient. So that's where the math drives you. So then you can do comparative back of the envelope. What about different interest rates? What about different risk premia? You can calculate time to rate. Okay. And I'm going to do this. So now I'm just going to conclude by this. And I learned this from guys well, guess what? This was developed at Princeton too. Really developed duality. So there's a dual to this problem. And I'll just mechanically say what the dual of the problem, but first I'll state it. One of Alexander Hamilton's heroes, Colbert, said, "The art of taxation consists in so plucking the goose so as to obtain the largest amount of feathers with the least amount of hissing." Okay, so we have a dual problem. So it's going to be, the physical environment is going to be exactly the same, but the state is going to be changed and the arrangement is going to be changed. So what there's going to be, is going to be the king hands over the tax technology and the tax function to an entrepreneur who wants to maximize the present value of the stuff he can get from the goose. So that's taxes minus government expenditures. And he has access to these risk prices. He can insure. So he insures, so that's what he wants to maximize. There's no extra impatience there. Okay, so I want to maximize at world prices what I can get. And the tau t is when you've killed so then now this is Sanikoff, okay, or Aguiar does stuff this way. So finding the states in art, what's the range? There's no markets. There's no market. So think of what the guys at Princeton have. This is where there's not separating hyperplanes. There's a dual to that other problem. So what is it? So what's WT? WT is now the state. What it is, it's a state variable that's inherited from the past. And what is it? WT is this thing. WT is the conditional expectation. There's that extra impatience. There's this. And this is what the poor little taxpayers are getting. They get Y after you've taken those taxes and that. And this is a continuation value. So what the tax farmer does is he maximizes this thing, but he's got and how does he do it? He has a state variable which is not debt, it's the continuation value. And what's the analog of autarky? It's one of my co-authors calls it revolution. And it's this. You can no longer tax smooth, and you got to get directly. Okay. And then what happens is so there's the constraint, and then what happens is this problem produces the same tax policy, tax sequence, and this kind of gets back to Richard's problem. So what you do is this WT is inherited from the past. That was a promised value. But at time 0, in order for the tax farmer to make better off, he might want to give a big gift up front. Why? That thing. That's Alan's thing. Because these guys are impatient. So I can raise their initial continuation value. And by giving a jump in their initial continuation value. There's calculations like this all over, like Sanikoff and Amador and then what's kind of interesting is eventually you run this thing to the point where this is just inequality, and then what happens then? We need historians. Yeah. Yeah, it does. It does. If you look at my, yeah, the answer is this was Barro's. The third derivative was 0 here. Yep. Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Nevertheless, this little thing captures something. Anyway, one of my ancestors, not so recent, used to work as a. You ever seen Rocky Balboa, that first movie? And do you remember what he was doing? That's what my one of my ancestors, who I knew, was a loan collector for a private loan collecting agency. So that's kind of the idea. And he could do things that the government didn't want to do. But your thing is the start of your comment's the start of an amendment of this. There's some additional incentive constraints on this. Don't tell the Republicans about this dual problem. Thanks, Richard.